Imagine, if you can, being a woman in the 1700s, facing a world where your choices were so limited, your voice often silenced. And then picture this, rising above those limitations, challenging those societal norms, even building a fortune by exposing, well, the hypocrisy of the elite who try to control you.
That's incredible.
That's the true story we're diving into today.
Wow.
The scandalous life of Margaret, or Peg Plunkett, an Irish woman who, well, she defied every expectation of her time.
What I think makes Peg's story even more captivating is that we get to hear it straight from her. She wrote her own memoirs.
Oh, wow.
Which is a pretty bold move for a woman in the 18th century,
Yeah.
let alone one who lived a life as, well, unconventional as Peg did. This allows us to really dive deep into her world, through her eyes,
Right.
understanding those challenges that she faced and the choices that she made.
And what a story she had to tell.
Oh, yeah.
Peg's life was like a whirlwind, of privilege and hardship, love and betrayal, resilience and defiance. She was born into a wealthy Irish family, early 1700s. You might think that meant a life of comfort, but fate had other plans.
Yeah, it's important to remember that even for those born into privilege, life in 18th century Ireland could be, well, it could be precarious. Disease was everywhere, the social structures were so rigid, and for women, options were really limited.
Right.
I think this context is just crucial for understanding the choices Peg made throughout her life.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So a devastating fever just sweeps through Peg's family, claiming the lives of both her mother and a brother. Control of the family falls to her surviving brother, Christopher, a man who, well, from what we know, was a real tyrant. He treated his sisters like servants, withholding their dowries and subjecting them to just cruel punishments.
This act of withholding their dowries was really significant.
Yeah.
In those times, a dowry was a woman's financial lifeline. Yeah, essentially her ticket to marriage and a secure future. By controlling their dowries, Christopher was really, he was stripping his sisters of their independence,
Right.
their agency, trapping them in a system that was really designed to limit their options.
It's difficult to grasp the level of control that he had over their lives. But what exactly did a dowry represent for a woman back then?
Think of it as more than just money. It was a woman's social standing, her bargaining power, in the marriage market. Without it, she was viewed as a burden, less desirable. Her prospects for a comfortable life were, drastically reduced. Christopher was essentially condemning his sisters to a life of dependence and hardship.
It's no wonder that Peg wanted to escape such a, suffocating environment.
Right.
She runs away to Dublin, drawn to, well, the city's vibrancy, the energy.
Sure.
But Christopher, ever the controlling figure, drags her back, further tightening his grip on her life.
This escape attempt shows us Peg's independent spirit, her yearning for something more than the confines of her brother's oppressive household.
Yeah.
But it also highlights the limited options that were available to women in that era. Running away wasn't, a sustainable solution.
Right.
She was always at risk of being caught and returned to her brother's control.
It's a heartbreaking realization, isn't it? That sense of being trapped.
Yeah.
And tragically, things at home only got worse. Peg's younger sister,
Yeah.
unable to bear the weight of Christopher's cruelty, and the despair of their situation, she actually died of malnutrition.
That's awful. This tragedy just underscores the devastating consequences of Christopher's actions. He wasn't, just being unkind. He was directly responsible for his sister's death. It's a stark reminder of those power dynamics at play and the vulnerability of women in such a restrictive society.
Then comes, I guess, a turning point, a moment that would forever alter the course of Peg's life. She falls in love with, well, a seemingly kind man, Mr. Dardis, but their relationship leads to an unplanned pregnancy. And, well, he abandons her, leaving Peg to face the consequences alone.
This is where Peg encounters a brutal reality of societal double standards. While Dardis walks away relatively unscathed, Peg is labeled as a fallen woman.
Right.
A label that carried immense social stigma and severely limited her options.
It's a label that's, well, it's hard for us to understand today. What did it actually mean to be a fallen woman in 18th century Ireland?
It meant being ostracized, judged, deemed unworthy of respect or societal acceptance. A woman who, lost her virginity before marriage, especially outside of a committed relationship, was considered, well, damaged goods. She was seen as a threat to the social order, a source of shame. Her prospects for a respectable future were, severely diminished.
So, Peg finds herself facing the full force of society's judgment alone and pregnant. It's a situation, well, many would find impossible to overcome.
And yet, even in this moment of utter despair, Peg's resilience starts to shine through. Instead of succumbing to the pressure, she chooses to fight for survival, to navigate those limited options available to her and carve out a path forward. Welcome back to our deep dive into the life of Peg Plunkett. When we left off, Peg was facing those harsh consequences of, well, societal judgment.
Yeah.
Alone, pregnant after being abandoned by Mr. Dardis. It's a pivotal moment that forces her to confront those limited options that were, well, available to women in her position.
It's a situation that I think would break a lot of people. But Peg refuses to be a victim. She finds herself kind of navigating this world where survival often means making, well, difficult choices that people might not like.
Right, and remember, she's been ostracized by her own family, her reputation's been tarnished, poverty, destitution, those are looming large. And it's in this desperate state that she meets Mr. Caulfield, a wealthy wine merchant who, well, he offers her a way out to become his mistress.
It's easy to judge from a modern perspective,
Right.
But we have to consider the context, right?
Yeah.
What were the societal pressures and those economic realities back then that might have influenced her decision?
Imagine yourself in Peg's shoes, abandoned, pregnant, and facing, well, destitution in a society that offers little support for women in her position. Becoming a mistress, while certainly not ideal, offered, I guess, a degree of financial security, protection in a world where options were incredibly limited.
It was a decision that was born out of necessity.
Yeah.
A way to survive in a system that offered seemingly no other path. But it's also a decision that reveals Peg's, her pragmatism, her willingness to adapt to those challenging circumstances.
Right.
She wasn't just passively accepting her fate.
No.
She was actively trying to find a way to improve her situation.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that she wasn't simply a, passive recipient of Caulfield's generosity. She was intelligent, resourceful, and she brought, her own skills and personality to that relationship. She wasn't merely existing, She was learning, observing, understanding the dynamics of power and wealth in a way that would prove, well, invaluable later in her life.
So while it might appear to be a step back, it's actually a period of growth.
Yeah.
A period of learning for Peg.
Exactly.
She's gathering knowledge, honing her skills, and preparing herself for what lies ahead.
Precisely. However, her time with Caulfield doesn't last. The cycle of pregnancy, loss, and abandonment it repeats itself. She experiences another stillbirth, and once again, she's left to fend for herself.
This recurring pattern of heartbreak, the loss, it speaks to the vulnerability of women in her position. They were often reliant on the goodwill of men, subject to their whims. They had very little recourse when those men, decided to move on.
Right, and it's a testament to Peg's resilience that she doesn't just succumb to despair. Each setback seems to fuel her determination to create a better life for herself, one where she's not dependent on the, well, fleeting affections of men. This is where I think her transformation truly begins.
This is where things get really interesting.
Huh.
She enters a world that was considered taboo, even dangerous.
Right.
But one that offered, a unique opportunity for women like Peg to take control of their own destinies. She becomes a sex worker.
And it's important to understand that for women in 18th century Ireland, sex work wasn't always a last resort.
Really?
Yeah, for some it was a calculated decision, a way to achieve financial independence and a degree of autonomy in a society that, well, offered them very little.
So Peg isn't just trying to survive anymore.
Right.
She's actively seeking agency, a way to break free from those constraints that have, defined her life so far.
Absolutely. And she's entering this world with a keen eye for observation. She learns from the other women. She's understanding those nuances of the trade, the needs, the desires of her clientele. She's not just participating, she's studying, she's strategizing. And while preparing to carve out her own niche in this competitive world.
She soon meets a wealthy man named Mr. Leon, who takes her into his luxurious estate. For a while, it seems like she may have finally found the security and the comfort that she's always craved.
But Peg's not content with simply being kept. She yearns for something more than the, gilded cage of Mr. Leon's world.
Right.
She misses the vibrancy of Dublin's social scene, that energy and excitement of a life lived on her own terms.
This rejection of a comfortable, seemingly secure life it's a pivotal moment, isn't it? It reveals her growing sense of self-worth. that refusal to be defined by the expectations of a man, even one who offers her material comfort.
And her reason for rejecting Mr. Leon's marriage proposal is, well, particularly revealing.
Mhm.
She sees marriage as a social contract, a tool for controlling women and legitimizing children, not, a path to true happiness or fulfillment.
It's a remarkably modern perspective, don't you think? For a woman living in the 18th century, she's challenging those very foundations of societal expectations. She's placing individual freedom and autonomy above the perceived security of marriage.
This bold declaration of independence is a testament to Peg's evolving worldview. She's not simply rebelling against societal norms, she's actively constructing her own set of values,
Yeah.
one where women have the right to choose their own path, to define their own happiness.
So Peg returns to Dublin,
Uh-huh.
back to the world that she knows, but this time with a newfound sense of purpose, a vision for something bigger, something that will allow her to truly control her own destiny.
And this is where her entrepreneurial spirit truly blossoms. She partners up with another sex worker, Sally Hayes, and together they create something truly innovative for their time. A high-end brothel that caters to Dublin's elite.
This partnership with Sally is so crucial. It's not just a business arrangement.
No?
It's a collaboration between, two strong, independent women who understand the power of female solidarity in a world that was dominated by men.
Yeah.
They recognize their shared ambition, their desire to create something more than just, a means of survival.
Exactly. And their approach is so unique. They're not just providing a service, they're creating an experience.
Right.
Their brothel offers champagne, conversation and a level of sophistication that sets them apart from the competition.
They're catering to a discerning clientele. Men who are seeking more than just, a physical encounter.
Sure.
They're looking for discretion, companionship, and intellectual stimulation.
And Peg and Sally are brilliantly positioned to provide all of that.
Yeah.
They're intelligent, they're witty, and they understand the art of conversation. They can discuss politics, literature, current events, all while offering a level of discretion that their clients value.
It's a business model that thrives in Dublin's, social scene. Peg and Sally become incredibly successful, enjoying the fruits of their labor, the financial independence, and that, social influence that their unique enterprise affords them. But as we'll discover when we return, their success doesn't come without its, challenges. The world they inhabit is still one where men hold the power, and Peg will once again be forced to confront the dark side of that reality. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been, exploring the extraordinary life of Margaret Peg Plunkett, a woman who just defied societal expectations, carved out her own path in, 18th century Ireland. We left off with Peg and her business partner, Sally Hayes, at the height of their success running this high-end brothel that catered to Dublin's elite. But as we all know, Peg's life, was never easy, never smooth sailing.
Yeah, you're right. Despite their success, they couldn't escape those realities of, a society that often viewed women, especially those in their profession, as, I guess, disposable. Their world was still one where men held the power. And as we'll see, that power could be pretty brutal, unexpected.
This next chapter is, maybe the most harrowing part of Peg's story. It involves a figure from her past, a man who represents the darker side of the world she inhabits. Buck Lawless.
Remind us who Buck is and what his reappearance means for Peg.
Buck Lawless, he's a figure who I think embodies the complexity of Peg's relationships with men. He's a former lover, someone she was deeply involved with, but also someone who, represents a pattern of exploitation, even abuse, that marked so many of her romantic entanglements. His reappearance it signals a return to a past that Peg has tried to escape, a reminder of those vulnerabilities that she still carries. It's like a reminder that no matter how successful, how independent she becomes, she's still in this system that often fails to protect women. A system where men like Buck can just act with impunity.
Yeah.
So how does this reunion unfold?
Buck, he resurfaces, tries to rekindle their relationship. He's, charming, persuasive, and despite the pain he caused her, Peg kind of finds herself drawn back into his orbit. Remember, she craves love, connection, and Buck represents, I guess, a familiar comfort, even with the inherent dangers.
It's a classic example of someone returning to a familiar pattern.
Yeah.
Even when, they know it might be harmful. It speaks to the power of emotional ties. the difficulty of breaking free from those toxic relationships.
Exactly. And it highlights the complexities of her character. She's strong, she's defiant, but also vulnerable, susceptible to, I guess, manipulation, especially from someone who understands her emotional needs.
So Peg, against her better judgment, she allows Buck back into her life. What are the consequences of this decision?
The situation, it spirals out of control. Buck's financially irresponsible. His recklessness leads to, well, conflict. With Peg and Sally, tensions rise, and eventually Peg, along with Sally, travels to Cork to confront Buck, to demand repayment for the debts he's incurred.
It sounds like they're taking charge, asserting their right to be treated fairly, to be compensated for their, services.
Yes, but their attempt to reclaim that control, well, it backfires. While in Cork, they encounter this group of young, privileged college students known as the Pinking Dindies. These young men, fueled by alcohol and a sense of entitlement, they target Peg and Sally, seeing them as easy prey.
It's just another example of that precarious position women like Peg had in society.
Mm-hmm.
Despite their success, they were still vulnerable to violence, to exploitation, especially from those who saw them as objects to be used and discarded.
It's a stark reminder that social standing, financial independence, they offered, very limited protection for women in that era. The Pinking Dindies, they represent that, well, the darker side of male privilege, that willingness to use violence, intimidation to assert dominance over women they considered, I guess, beneath them.
What follows is maybe the most horrific incident in Peg's, long and turbulent life. These young men break into her lodgings and subject her to a brutal, sustained attack. They beat her, they rape her, and they even force her young daughter to watch the entire ordeal.
This attack is a turning point, I think, not just in her personal story, but in our, understanding of her character. It's a moment of profound trauma, a violation that, well, it leaves lasting scars,
Yeah.
both physical and emotional. Yet it also reveals her extraordinary resilience, her refusal to be broken by even the most horrific of experiences.
The aftermath of the attack is devastating. Peg loses the baby she was carrying, and tragically, her young daughter dies shortly after. Probably, probably from the trauma of witnessing that attack. It's difficult to imagine the pain and anguish that Peg must have, endured.
And this loss is, well, it's compounded by the fact that she had already, experienced the death of two other children. It speaks volumes about her strength of character, that she even found the will to go on, to seek justice in a system that so often, failed to protect women like her.
And seek justice, she does. In an act of extraordinary defiance, she decides to press charges against her attackers. This is a woman who has been repeatedly betrayed, exploited, and now, brutally violated. Yet she refuses to be silenced. She will not let these men, walk free.
Her decision to, take legal action is a testament to her courage and her understanding of those power dynamics that are at play. She knows that men like the Pinking Dindies often, escape the consequences for their actions, especially when their victims are women like Peg, whose voices are so easily dismissed.
So she challenges the system, knowing that the odds are stacked against her. What happens next?
Her case, it goes to court. And she faces intense scrutiny, intimidation. The leader of the Pinking Dindies, he threatens her, tries to silence her, make her, drop the charges. But Peg, she stands firm. She refuses to be cowed. She testifies in court, detailing the horrific events of that night, reliving that trauma, just to hold her attackers accountable.
It's a powerful moment, a testament to her, resilience, her determination to fight for what's right, even when facing incredible pressure and opposition.
And her bravery, well, it pays off. The jury finds the men guilty, and they're sentenced to, imprisonment and banishment from Dublin. It's a stunning victory, not just for Peg, but for all women who have been, silenced, marginalized by a system that often fails to protect them.
This victory is, it's a testament to Peg's unwavering spirit, her refusal to be defined by the violence that she endured. It's a moment that showcases her strength, her courage, and her understanding of the power of using her voice to challenge injustice.
But her story, well, it doesn't end there. Peg's a survivor, and she continues to navigate the complexities of her life, making choices that both surprise and inspire.
This brings us to the final chapter of Peg's life. Facing mounting debts, she finds herself imprisoned. But true to form, Peg, she finds a way to turn even this adversity into an opportunity. She writes and publishes her memoirs, sharing her incredible life story with the world. And in a brilliant move, she names the men who owe her money, those who have exploited her, those who have tried to silence her. It's a stroke of genius. It shames those men into paying their debts, securing her release from prison.
It's a powerful ending to a remarkable life. Peg Plunkett, a woman who defied every expectation, challenged every norm, and ultimately used her voice to expose the hypocrisy of a society that tried to control her. Her story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the power of using one's voice, and the enduring strength of women who dare to forge their own paths.
Peg's memoirs continue to captivate readers even today, centuries after they were written. They offer a glimpse into a world that was both familiar and utterly foreign. A world where societal expectations could be both rigid and surprisingly fluid. But most importantly, they remind us that history is filled with the stories of extraordinary individuals who dared to challenge the status quo, who dared to live life on their own terms. Individuals like Margaret Peg Plunkett, whose story I hope will continue to inspire and challenge us for generations to come. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating and sometimes scandalous life of Peg Plunkett. We encourage you to seek out her memoirs and discover the full scope of her story for yourselves. And we'll be back soon with another deep dive into the lives of those who dared to be different.